The daughter of a powerful billionaire was only 3 years old, yet for the past year, she had not spoken a word, had not taken a step, only sat silently in the corner, clutching an old teddy bear, a child still breathing, but as if her soul had drifted away with the mother who was gone. There are moments in life when we believe we have everything, a perfect family, a future already drawn out, projects that never falter. But with just one unexpected turn, everything can collapse, and we are forced to keep living with a void that nothing can fill. Nathaniel Harrington, 38 years old, was proof of that. To the world, he was the CEO of a real estate and architecture empire, a wealthy and powerful man, respected and feared in equal measure. Yet behind the soaring glass walls of the Upper East Side, he was nothing more than a man broken in silence. A year earlier, Emily Harrington, his wife, had died in a car accident. That day, Emily had taken Lily shopping, while Nate stayed at the office for an important meeting. A truck lost control and claimed Emily's life on the spot. Lily survived. But from that moment on, she never spoke, never walked, as if she had locked herself inside a world her father could not reach. And Nate carried a relentless weight of blame. If I had gone with them that day, maybe everything would have been different. For 12 months, Nate tried everything. He brought in the best psychologists, hired 3 professional nannies. All failed. To him, they were only people doing a paid job. They fed Lily, put her to sleep, played beside her. But there was no warmth in their eyes or their hands. One by one, he dismissed them without hesitation. As for himself, he chose to bury everything in work. Projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars, glass towers rising across Manhattan, all nothing more than a shell to cover the emptiness. But when night came, in his office overlooking Central Park, the city lights could not drive away the darkness within. There remained only a father, living with the memory of a lost wife and a child silent as stone. Brooklyn, an autumn morning. The screech of the subway echoed from underground. On the sidewalk, Clara Bennett, 27 years old, hurried toward the grocery store where she worked the morning shift. Her coat was worn, the heels of her shoes unevenly ground down, yet in those brown eyes, there still remained a light not easily extinguished. 6 years earlier, her life had turned. Clara had once been an outstanding nursing student, praised by professors, trusted by friends to succeed. She had believed she would one day wear the white coat, stand in the hospital, and give patients care filled with compassion. Then her father collapsed from a sudden stroke, without warning, without a single farewell. At the funeral, her mother was so silent it was frightening. The woman who had once laughed brightly whenever Clara shared stories from school now stared blankly into the distance. The cramped house suddenly felt unbearably heavy. Her younger brother, just 15 years old, still sitting at his desk, the notebook left unfinished on the page. That day, he said only one sentence: "Sister, what do we do now?" Clara knew what had to be done. She packed away her books, tied up the medical textbooks, once marked with bright highlights, filed the papers to withdraw from school, walked away from the dream she had nurtured all her youth. From then on, Clara took on every job she could: morning shifts at the grocery, evening shifts at a diner, weekends cleaning houses. The pay was little, the work heavy, but enough to keep her mother on medication, enough to buy her brother his books. There were nights when Clara came home so exhausted she fell asleep with her shoes still on. Yet every morning, she still rose early, tied her hair neatly, and gave herself a small smile in the mirror. Not for herself, but for her mother, for her brother. The one thing Clara never gave up was her time at the volunteer center, a tiny room with faded yellow walls and wobbly chairs. But there, children chattered and called her name. A little boy handed her a clumsy drawing. A little girl held out a cold hand. Waiting for her shoelaces to be tied, Clara knelt down, her eyes soft, as if she had forgotten every trace of weariness. And it was there that Margaret Collins noticed her. Margaret had served more than 20 years as housekeeper for the Harrington family, a discreet, exacting woman, not one to trust easily. But over many weeks, she observed Clara, the way she gave her own food to a child, the way she listened patiently until a hesitant story found its end. In that quiet watching, Margaret understood something else. not only the children at the center, but the Harringtons themselves were wounded souls in need of healing. Clara never pretended. She was not kind for anyone to see. It all came naturally, like breathing. One late afternoon, as Clara was gathering toys scattered across the floor, Maggie stepped close. Her voice was low, deliberate. "Child, have you ever thought about becoming a nanny?" Clara let out a faint laugh. "I never have. I only wanted to help the kids here." Margaret stayed silent for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. "There is one little girl who needs you. She doesn't need another certificate on the wall. She needs a real heart." Clara did not yet understand those words, but Margaret did. She had seen too many nannies come and go through the Harrington home, each one with brilliant resumes, impeccable degrees. But they only worked, they did not love. And one after another, they left, leaving Lily even deeper in silence. This time, Margaret chose to trust her instincts, and her instincts pointed to the young woman standing before her with worn shoes, a gentle smile, and a heart that did not tire. That evening, back in the small Brooklyn apartment, Clara sat at the table, her hand brushing over the old medical textbook still on the shelf. Beside it stood her mother's bottle of antidepressants. In the other room, her brother sat studying, the lamplight spilling through the crack of the door. Clara sighed softly. The dream from before felt impossibly far away. She did not know that her quiet kindness was opening a new door not only for herself, but for a little girl who had lost her laughter. The elevator doors opened with a cold ding. Clara stepped out, her cheap shoes pressing against marble so polished she could see her own trembling reflection. The penthouse on the top floor rose before her like a fortress of glass, luxurious, flawless, but stripped of any breath of life. Ivory walls carried expensive abstract paintings. Wooden floors gleamed with a chill perfection. Not a flower in sight, not a trace that a child's laughter had ever lived here. Nathaniel stood waiting in the center of the living room. His gray suit clung neatly, his tie pulled straight to the edge of suffocation. At 38, the famed CEO of Manhattan, he needed no words to make the air taut. His gaze swept over Clara, a glance swift, but steeped in contempt. To him, she was only another nanny, destined to fail as the three before her had. Clara pressed her lips together, lowered her head slightly. She did not resist. She was too accustomed to the judging eyes of those who believed that diplomas alone determined worth. At her side, Margaret stepped forward, her voice stern yet gentle. "Miss Bennet, come with me." Clara followed the housekeeper down a long corridor, where the late afternoon light spilled through towering panes of glass. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, as though the entire house was holding its breath. A white wooden door opened. Lily's room, unlike the grandeur outside. This space was small, arranged so neatly it seemed drained of life. In the corner, under dim light, a little girl sat curled up. Lily wore a simple cotton dress, her arms wrapped tightly around a frayed old teddy bear. Her wide blue eyes stared into the void, heavy with a sorrow far older than 3 years. Clara stopped at the threshold. Her heart sank. That gaze, so clear, so deep, and brimming with loss. It was the same gaze she had once seen in her own mirror 6 years ago, after her father had collapsed on the floor from a sudden stroke. The same gaze when she packed away her dream of wearing the white coat, stepping instead into the grind of survival. A gaze that knew what loss was, yet could not give it voice. Clara lowered herself to her knees, bringing her eyes level so as not to tower over the child. She said nothing, only offered a quiet smile, her hands resting palms up on her knees, letting Lily see she brought no threat. Lily did not react. She only clutched the bear tighter, as if afraid someone might take it away. Behind them, Nathaniel still stood in the doorway, silent, watching. The doubt etched across his face had not faded. But Margaret, the woman who had raised him since boyhood, cast him a sidelong glance. In her eyes lay a quiet trust. If anyone could reach into Lily's pain, it was the young woman now kneeling before her. On the first morning, Clara stepped down into the marble-floored living room, where sunlight spilled through towering panes of glass. Everything in the penthouse gleamed, immaculate yet cold, as though no trace of human life remained. Nathaniel was already there, holding a cup of black coffee, his tailored suit as crisp and rigid as the man himself. He did not ask her name again, nor why she had taken the job. Only one sentence, dry and sharp as ice. "Keep Lily safe. I don't need another disappointment." Clara gave a slight nod. His indifference pierced her. But beneath the words, she sensed something else. Not just contempt, but a thick armor masking fear. A father who had lost all trust. Nathaniel set his cup down, turned, and walked away without waiting for her answer. The sound of his shoes echoed across the floor, fading into distance. Clara stood still for a moment, swallowing the sting of being dismissed. She knew that if she wished to remain, she would have to prove herself through actions, not promises. Lily's room was smaller than Clara had imagined, though carefully decorated. Patterned wallpaper, a little bookshelf, a bed spread with pale pink. Yet the air was heavy, as though even the colors had been swallowed by grief. Lily sat curled in the corner, back against the wall, her old teddy bear clasped tight in her arms. Her blue eyes stared into the distance, not a sound escaping her. Clara quietly took a seat on the chair beside the bed, careful not to move too close. She opened a book and began to read aloud, her voice warm and steady, not loud, not hurried, as though she were only speaking to herself. From time to time, she slipped in a little aside. "When my brother was little, he thought cats could talk." Without waiting for a reply, she turned another page, patient still. At mealtime, Clara tried sitting with Lily, placing the tray near her but never forcing. Sometimes Lily turned to face the wall, silent for hours. Clara remained, sometimes humming a lullaby under her breath, sometimes simply waiting in quiet. In the afternoon, when Lily drifted to sleep on the bed, her teddy slipped from her grasp. Clara bent down, gently tucked it back into her arms, then pulled the blanket up to her shoulders. Her movement so natural, it was as if she had done it 100 times before. Compared with the 3 nannies before her, who had tried every technique, from psychological games to behavior training, Clara did nothing remarkable. But it was precisely that doing nothing, her steady presence, that began to lift the weight in the room. She did not need Lily to speak right away. She did not need the child to stand, to run, to smile. The only thing Clara wanted to offer was a sense of safety, that even in silence, someone would remain by her side. The kitchen in the early morning was filled with weak sunlight filtering through thick glass. Clara opened the fridge, her hand brushing against a basket of strawberries. Maggie had whispered the day before. Lily used to love strawberry juice. Before Emily passed, Clara washed them, sliced them, dropped them into the blender. The hum of the machine rose in a space too accustomed to silence. Just as she set the pink-red glass on the table, Nathaniel entered. His eyes darkened instantly. "What are you doing?" His voice cut like ice. Startled, Clara explained softly. "Just juice," Maggie said. "Never give Lily that. She's allergic." His tone sharpened, his gaze like a blade. Clara froze. She did not believe him. In his eyes there was no trace of a father's fear for his child's pain, only control, as though anything outside his reach was a threat. But Clara did not argue. She only nodded, carried the glass to the sink, and poured it away. Inside, bitterness rose in her chest. He wanted to lock away the world, just to keep the fragments inside his glass fortress. That afternoon, Clara spread a rug on Lily's floor, gathered a few old socks, and secretly tied them into silly puppets. Lily sat in the corner, clutching her bear, her blue eyes veiled in sorrow. "Hello, Princess Lily." Clara pitched her voice high, raising a sock puppet in greeting. "I am Sir Carrot, here to protect this castle." She wobbled deliberately, pretending to fall back, then flailed dramatically. "Oh no, I'm stuck." Lily did not react, not even a blink. Clara bit her lip but pressed on. "Save me, Princess. If not, I'll turn into a pancake." She rolled onto the floor, arms flapping ridiculously, then let the puppet flop onto her stomach. A pause hung in the air, until suddenly, a soft giggle broke out, light as a drop rippling across water. Clara froze. Lily's eyes curved, her lips pressed together as if to hold it back, but failed. A short, bright laugh escaped. Clara's heart ached with joy, a smile after nearly a year of darkness. Then the miracle deepened. Lily set her teddy down, hesitantly crawled from her corner. Slowly, she moved closer, her gaze wary yet eager. Clara stayed still, not daring to move. Lily placed the bear onto Clara's stomach first, as if testing. Clara widened her eyes in mock surprise. "Oh, so Sir Carrot has a companion already." Lily giggled again. Then, all at once, she climbed fully onto Clara's stomach. Sitting there, her tiny hands gripping the bear, her face leaned close, her eyes brighter than any light in the penthouse. Clara's heart burst open. She said nothing. She simply let the moment fill the room that had only known silence. Outside the door, Nathaniel stood still. He had stopped when the sound of laughter spilled from his daughter's room, an echo he had thought lost forever. His hand gripped the doorframe until his knuckles turned white. Before him was a sight he could not believe. His little girl, the child who had shut out the world since her mother's death, now laughing on the stomach of a stranger. It struck him like a blade, pain and relief all at once. He wanted to step inside, yet his feet refused to move. His throat tightened, his breath caught. In that moment, Nathaniel understood. Something had just changed forever. Morning light streamed through the tall glass panes of the penthouse, casting a soft golden layer over the wide dining table. Plates were neatly arranged, the tablecloth crisp white, a small vase of flowers placed in the center, offering a fragile hint of warmth. Usually, this place felt as cold as a boardroom, but this morning, something was different. A silence not entirely heavy, almost reminiscent of the word family. Maggie set out chairs for everyone. Clara sat beside Lily, trying to create the most ordinary sense of routine. Lily still clutched her old teddy bear, her blonde hair falling to cover half her face. But she sat quietly at the table instead of hiding away in her room as she always had. That alone made Clara smile inwardly. Nathaniel arrived last, still in his immaculate suit, still carrying the unreadable aura of a CEO. Yet when he sat down, for the first moment, he did not disappear into his phone or his files. His eyes flicked over his daughter, then, unexpectedly, turned to Clara. "How is Lily?" His voice was low, almost perfunctory. But those gray eyes lingered just long enough for Clara to glimpse a small crack in the ice. Clara answered softly, without embellishment, only the truth. Yesterday she listened to music for a few minutes, and last night she ate a few more spoonfuls of soup. She also lifted her head when I called her name. Nathaniel said nothing more. He gave a slight nod, then turned back to the plate in front of him. But in that instant, his eyes slid once more toward his daughter. Lily did not speak, but her tiny hand tightened on the bear, and instead of turning away, her blue eyes hesitated, flicking briefly to meet his, just for a heartbeat, then dropped again. Yet for Clara, it felt like a fragile thread had been tied back together. Breakfast ended quickly. Nathaniel adjusted his tie, picked up the briefcase waiting on the chair. "I have a meeting. The Manhattan Project needs to be signed today," he said, half as an announcement, half as a reminder of the busy man he was. His world was still the $100 million deals, where everything could be measured in numbers. But just as he stepped out, he paused for half a second. He did not turn back, but his eyes had already recorded the image. Clara sitting quietly beside Lily, patient with every small change. A simple picture, nothing like the thick reports or boardrooms ablaze with light. Nathaniel walked on, his stride firm, but inside him, that fragile image clung to him still like a faint light, at the end of a tunnel he had not yet dared to believe in. That afternoon, the fading sunlight poured across the glass panes, stretching into long amber streaks upon the polished wooden floor. In the penthouse, usually silent as stone, Clara's voice rose softly. She stood near the window, phone pressed to her ear, keeping her tone low enough not to disturb Lily, who was drawing in her room. "Yes, I know, but there's a little girl. She's been through trauma, and now she's so withdrawn. I want to learn some simple methods, small exercises, like gentle physical therapy, or activities that might help her feel safer. Could you send me some materials?" Her voice lowered, earnest, pleading. It was not a business call, just an old friend from medical school, someone Clara trusted. She did not realize that behind her, a figure had stopped. Nathaniel, in his gray suit, passing along the hall, had caught every word. His eyes darkened at once. Whatever fragile calm had built over the past days shattered instantly. He strode into the living room, the sound of his shoes striking hard against the floor. Clara startled. Turning quickly, she hadn't yet ended the call when Nathaniel's voice cut in sharp. "What are you doing?" Clara hurriedly hung up, her hand trembling slightly. I was asking advice from an old classmate. He used to study therapies for children." "No," Nathaniel spat the word, each syllable clipped, his gray eyes cold. "You have no right." The air in the room thickened to suffocation. Clara stood frozen, clutching her phone, confusion and pain welling inside. Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice pounding into her like an accusation. "You are only a nanny. I hired you to watch Lily, to keep her safe. That's all. You don't get to decide methods. You don't get to decide anything about her. I've heard enough empty promises from doctors, from specialists, from people who swore they could heal her. They all failed, and now you. You think you're different." Clara bit her lip. She wanted to explain, to tell him she wasn't looking for miracles, only small ways to give Lily a fragile chance. But before his anger, every word caught in her throat. "You think I do this for myself?" she whispered at last, her voice shaking yet steady. I only want Lily to have another chance, even a small one." Nathaniel let out a harsh, humorless laugh, more a jagged breath than a sound of amusement. "A chance. You don't understand. She is all I have left, and I won't let anyone experiment on her again." Every word he hurled landed like a blade. Clara bowed her head, her eyes blurring not from fear, but from hurt. She remembered the way Lily had lifted her eyes toward her, the fleeting smile during yesterday's silly puppet show. Clara believed those moments were worth holding on to, worth nurturing. But for Nathaniel, everything seemed only a threat to the fragile control he clung to. The silence stretched long. In her room, Lily continued drawing, unaware of the storm outside her door. Clara said nothing more. She stood still, letting the misunderstanding settle like a shroud, knowing that arguing now would only raise the wall higher between them. She slipped back into Lily's room, bitterness in her chest. The quiet there was so deep. Clara could hear the tick of the wall clock. She sat down beside the bed, her eyes vacant, her hands trembling faintly. Tears slid down her cheeks without a sound. Pain that quiet was sharper than any cry. Lily, still nestled in her blanket, watched her closely with wide, solemn eyes. No one had taught a 3-year-old what to do in such moments, yet instinct led the way. Slowly, she drew out the worn teddy from her arms. Her tiny fingers stretched toward Clara, placing the bear in her hands. Clara froze, stunned. That bear was the one thing Lily had never released since the day she stopped speaking, as essential as breath. And now, it was being given to her. No words, no smile, only the most precious gift of trust from a child learning to believe again. Clara's throat tightened. Tears spilled over, but this time they were different. Not only from hurt, but from awe, from the fragile hope newly lit. She pressed the teddy against her chest, nodding softly toward Lily as if to say, "Thank you." Lily answered by leaning against her arm. That small weight, light as a breath, was enough to make Clara's heart tremble. In that moment, the two of them shared a language without words, only presence. Outside, Nathaniel had been standing long enough, silently witnessing every movement. He had half a mind to step inside. The anger from earlier still shadowed his eyes, but when he saw this, his broad shoulders stiffened. He said nothing. He only stood there, watching as Lily willingly gave up her bear, watching as Clara cradled it as if it were treasure. Quietly, he closed the door and returned to his office. But the words on the contract before him blurred. His mind held only the image of Lily resting her head against Clara's arm, something she had not done with anyone, not even him, for months. Nathaniel pressed his hand to his forehead. A faint dizziness passed through him. For the first time, he asked himself whether controlling everything truly protected his daughter, or whether it had locked them both in a prison with no way out. In the days after that outburst, the atmosphere in the penthouse began to shift, not suddenly, but quietly, like the surface of a frozen lake beginning to show hairline cracks. Nathaniel, who had once always eaten alone in his office, now occasionally appeared in the dining room. At first, he sat at the head of the table, silently working his knife and fork, barely looking at anyone. But after a few times, he accepted a plate from Clara's hand, nodding in place of words of thanks. One evening, when Clara handed Lily a block to fit into the toy castle, Nathaniel unexpectedly sat down beside them. The same hands once accustomed to signing contracts worth hundreds of millions now fumbled with tiny wooden pieces. When the tower collapsed, Lily let out a soft laugh. Both Clara and Nathaniel froze that sound, fragile yet more precious than anything. On other nights, Clara opened a picture book, her voice warm as she told fairy tales. For the first time, Nathaniel stayed instead of rising to leave. Sometimes, he even added to the story, slipping in a silly detail that made Lily cover her mouth to laugh. It was a sign of renewal, a smile, lifted eyes, little sounds escaping in broken syllables. Clara witnessed it all, her heart swelling with joy and trembling awe, as though she had touched a miracle she had never dared to dream of. One stormy night, as wind howled against the glass, and darkness swallowed Manhattan beyond, Clara was about to leave the room when Nathaniel's hoarse voice broke the silence. Emily used to hate storms. She said they reminded her of a childhood alone in an empty house. But I thought storms made us treasure calm moments more. It was the first time he had spoken his wife's name. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, his eyes rimmed red. He spoke of Emily, a simple woman who loved small things. A cup of tea in the morning, a pot of flowers on the windowsill, sometimes just holding hands on a walk. He, always busy, had promised to make it up later, but later had never come. The accident had stolen every chance. His voice broke, his trembling hand covering his face. Clara said nothing, only placed her hand gently on his shoulder. That touch undid him. Nathaniel crumpled, letting the tears he had buried for years spill free. For the first time, he was not the billionaire who controlled everything, but only a man who had lost his wife, a father adrift. Clara did not search for words of comfort. She simply wrapped her arms around him, quiet and steady. It was not the embrace of two people in love, but of two souls torn apart, finding one another in the storm, a silent sharing where the pain did not vanish, but no longer stood alone. Evenings in the penthouse grew quiet, warm light spilling across the table where Clara sat with a small stack of papers, her fingers unconsciously tracing the edge of the page. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting out through the enormous glass window where Manhattan's night still burned bright. Clara spoke, her voice cautious yet steady. "There's someone I'd like to try reaching out to. Professor Daniel Whitmore. He was once my teacher at university, specializing in therapy for traumatized children. He's retired now, but I think maybe he would help." Nathaniel turned toward her, his gaze wavering for a moment. His voice was low, touched with exhaustion. "Clara, what if it fails? What if she takes another wound? It's only been a year since Emily died. I don't know if Lily has the strength for another fall." Clara straightened, her eyes shining but gentle. "The worst thing isn't failure. It's doing nothing. Nathaniel, as long as there's a chance, Lily deserves it." Her words struck the deepest part of his fear. Nathaniel stayed silent, his hand tightening against the edge of the table. The next day, Clara received a reply. Professor Whitmore agreed, but with a strict condition. He had only 2 weeks left before moving overseas to join his son. After that, every door would close. The problem was, the first therapy session fell on the exact day Nathaniel was to sign the West End project contract, a deal worth hundreds of millions. Prepared for over a year, the two events were only a week apart. Impossible to reschedule. In his office, the calendar glowed on the computer screen, every number pressing in on him. Nathaniel sat motionless for several minutes, his heart pounding heavy. He knew that missing either one would bring consequences he could not measure. He picked up the phone, dialed his assistant. "Stephen, cancel next week's signing." A weighted silence stretched on the other end. Then Stephen's voice came, stunned. "Mr. Harrington, are you sure? This is the most critical contract of the year. This isn't like you." Nathaniel closed his eyes, the words leaving him sharp as a blade cutting through hesitation. "I'm sure. Tell the board I'll bear whatever losses come. Money can be made again." But if I wait even one more day, I could lose my daughter forever. When he hung up, Nathaniel sank back into his chair. His heart had cast off a crushing weight, yet his chest still trembled. He knew he had just placed his reputation and career on the scale, and this time he had chosen his daughter. The small wooden house by Lake Tahoe wore the calm of the mountains and forest. The air was clean, pine-scented with the damp of the vast lake. In the soft-lit room, Professor Daniel Whitmore, a man with white hair, kind eyes sharp with wisdom, sat facing Nathaniel and Clara. "It's not about money," he said slowly, his voice rough as aged wood. I agreed, because I believe in Clara. She was one of the rare students I could never forget. And I believe, with both your faith, we can bring this child back. Nathaniel bowed his head slightly, something stirring inside him he could not name. For years, he had used money to buy every solution, to hire the best doctors. But this time, it was not money, it was trust, and the devotion of another human being. The sessions began, not in sterile clinics, not with lifeless machines, but with the sound of piano echoing through a wooden room. Clara sat beside Lily, her hands gently guiding the little fingers to press the first notes. Lily hesitated, but slowly, trembling sounds filled the air. One day, the professor brought a gentle golden retriever. At first, Lily shrank back, clutching at Clara, but the dog only lay down, resting its head on her lap. Slowly, Lily's tiny hand brushed the soft, golden fur, and a shy smile flickered at the corners of her lips. The first smile Nathaniel had seen in months. Day by day, Lily changed. She began to lift her eyes to meet another's instead of hiding behind Clara. Broken syllables slipped out, ma, fleeting, then faint, but enough to make Nathaniel's heart quake. He turned away quietly, hiding tears he had long forbidden himself to shed. Then the morning of the miracle came. The living room lay carpeted soft, sunlight streaming through the glass, painting warm golden streaks. Clara was stacking wooden blocks into a tower, Lily seated beside her, eyes intent. Nathaniel stepped closer, barely breathing, afraid to shatter the fragile moment. "Come on, sweetheart," Clara whispered gently. "Just one step." "I'm right here," Lily hesitated. Her tiny hands released the block, stretching forward. One step, then another. Her little legs wobbled, as if braving the whole world. Nathaniel held his breath. Clara did not move. Then a stumble she fell, but not into cold emptiness. Lily toppled straight into the outstretched arms of them both. Nathaniel and Clara caught her together, holding the small, trembling body close. In that moment, time stopped. Lily lifted her face, her eyes shining bright. A laugh bubbled out, so pure, it shattered every wall of ice inside Nathaniel's heart. He could not hold back. He clutched his daughter to his chest, letting his tears fall freely. In the silence that followed, all three understood. The pain had not vanished, but it was being soothed. Each small step of Lily's was a heartbeat restored, drawing them closer to what once had seemed untouchable hope. Spring returned to New York, the city still alive with the music of car horns and the blaze of neon lights. But high above, in the top floor of a skyscraper, the air was no longer what it once had been. Nathaniel's penthouse was no longer a silent fortress, echoing only with the sound of shoes on polished floors. Now, the glass walls reflected the laughter of a 3-year-old girl, mingling with the gentle voice of a young woman. Colorful toy boxes lay scattered beside the once cold sofa. Emily's portrait still hung in the living room, but her smile no longer brought only pain. It had become a tender reminder. Life goes on, and love can return. One morning, as Clara was tying Lily's shoelaces, the little girl suddenly lifted her face, her blue eyes glimmering with a rare light, and whispered clearly, "Clara," just one word. But the room fell silent. Clara froze, her hands trembling. Nathaniel, standing nearby, felt his chest tighten, then release, as though freed after a long nightmare of fear. He looked at his daughter and the young woman beside her, and he realized it was not some distant miracle, but patience and love that had carried them here. The next day, Nathaniel took Clara and Lily away from the heart of Manhattan. The car rolled past tree-lined streets, leaving the cold towers of glass behind. Their destination, a small house in the suburbs, its white walls framed by a porch covered in lavender. The fragrance drifted gently on the evening air, like a warm welcome. Nathaniel did not call it a gift, nor make promises. He simply placed the keys in Clara's hand and said quietly, "We need a place that's truly a home." Clara was stunned. Since losing her parents, she had lived only by the kindness of others, never imagining she might have a place of her own. Now, this small house with its lavender garden was not just shelter. It was proof of the quiet, steady change in a man who had once only lived for numbers and contracts. But Nathaniel did not want to rebuild only his own home. He remembered the other children Clara had spoken of, little ones silenced by pain, just as Lily had been. One evening, when Lily was asleep, Nathaniel placed a folder on the table. "I want us to start a foundation, not to carry my name, but to help children like Lily. Will you join me?" Clara looked down at the papers, then back at him. Determination glowed in her eyes. "Yes, but I also want to keep studying. I need knowledge if I'm going to help more. I'll take care of the rest." Nathaniel replied, his voice calm but certain. "Stay with Lily. Keep studying and walk this path with me." And so a new life began. By day, Clara was still Lily's nanny, patiently guiding her through words and steps. By night, she attended classes, pursuing psychology, the dream she had once given up. In between, she worked with Nathaniel to build their charity, not with grand galas or polished reports, but with real programs, small therapy rooms for children, spaces filled with music, therapy dogs offering warmth. Day by day, something formed between them. Nathaniel made no promises. Clara held no illusions. They simply cleaned the kitchen together after dinner, read books to Lily before bed, sat quietly watching the little girl smile in her dreams. A new family was slowly taking shape, not through vows, but through small acts repeated every day. And in the suburban home filled with lavender, one could believe that from the deepest wounds, it is often the simplest things that nurture miracles. The story of Nathaniel, Clara, and Lily reminds us, some miracles don't come from wealth or power, but from patience, love, and the small choices we make each day. And you ever witnessed a miracle in your own life? Even if it was just a smile, a hug, or a hand reaching out at the right moment. Share your story in the comments below. Someone out there may need to hear it today. If this story touched your heart, press like, share it forward, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next journeys from American stories. You, too, can be part of a miracle with just one click.